played in the beginning between the press and the police, because the police don't want to give out too much information so it doesn't taint the case or whatever. And then there's like a loud ass plane. Give me a sec. There's like a loud ass plane. Give me a sec.
Just take a look at your DMs. I sent you something on X.
Whoa. Well, that's what?
And that's because I had I would have been probably able to catch about like 4 or 5 photos of this thing because it wasn't moving too quickly.
That looks like a fucking UFO, dude.
Yep. What the fuck is that, man? Didn't sound like a UFO. It sounded like a fucking helicopter.
Yeah, that's what just flew above you? Are you playing a prank on me?
I 100% just took that right now.
Holy shit, buddy. So I just want to explain to y'all what I'm looking at. What I'm looking at is... I can only describe it as a fucking UFO. I mean, it looks like a fucking UFO, dude.
The whole thing under it was lights. Like all lights. Right? Except not all of them are showing up in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
What's crazy, this is not a UFO episode.
It's not. It's not. We're going to have to include it in one, though, for sure. So everybody take a look here. And this was just flying over flak. And I don't know what else you call that. It's not a helicopter. It sounded like a helicopter. But that's definitely not a helicopter.
Don't look like no helicopter to me, buddy.
No helicopter I ever seen.
Like it was flying and then did an L shape. Once I popped out from like underneath my awning thing to like see it and then go, oh crap, and then pull my phone out and go to take a picture of the fucking thing. It beelined the other direction, but it looked like, what is a C-130? Like those big like seaplanes, right?
Yeah.
Looked like a huge belly plane with whatever the hell, like a shit ton of fucking lights on. This is the strangest. This actually, that photo kind of, if it was one of those and there was red and green lights on it, that would be something that I saw when I was, 13, 14.
No shit. Well, they're following you, buddy.
Yeah, man.
You're the magnet.
I don't think I like it.
I think you're going to realize it would have been much better to be a magnet, not a magnet. Magnet? I don't know how they say that. But you know, the
mignon is that's like a filet mignon.
Filet mignon.
Like you, we both have decades of government service together in intelligence and whatnot. DoD. I'm going to ask you point blank and put you on the spot on something. After my 2024 UAP hearing testimony in front of Congress, you had tweeted a response about my statement regarding AARO, where you said, I came and visited AARO and I was bitter because I didn't get a job, and that you believe that was because you didn't hire me because I was prone to conspiracy theories, and that you checked with some of my bosses on that statement. It's well out there. You tweeted it. And ultimately, you know, I didn't go visit AARO when you were there. It was after you left. I was invited by Mike Waschel, the Navy Intel rep, who asked me to come there, and that's what I spoke about during my hearing. And, of course, I didn't look for a job. He invited me, and for me to actually go for a GS-14 job after having been an Undersecretary of Commerce, that's kind of preposterous, I would say. And at the same time, when you said you check with my bosses, I had my bosses formerly were 2 2-stars, 4 4-stars, and a Secretary of Commerce who I've all spoken with, and you never really checked with them. So ultimately, your statement there was an outright lie.
AARO director, former AARO director, Sean Kirkpatrick, he held a press conference of sorts, a presentation on April 9th, and audio was just released. Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, friend of the show, kind of confronting him about some alleged lies. I know you'd like to give your take on this.
He made, I think, an arrogant and false assertion back to 1992, Admiral Tim Gallaudet retired, and I think it blew up in his face. So, as I understand it, it was some kind of Washington, D.C. area Skeptics Association meeting, and Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick had agreed to speak to the skeptics. No surprises there. He does his level best as a former and serving counterintelligence operative to basically pour on everything associated with the whole UAP subject.
Sean, may I ask a question here? Nice to connect with you in person for the first time. But about the Nimitz. So I've met all 4 pilots who had visual observations of the contact. And how do you explain that?
I explain it by a couple of different things. One, because I've spoken with them as well, and we've actually determined that the water underneath the main object that was being observed was welling up. And then we have the radar. Lots of people like to point to the radar. The radar was actually being tested by DARPA on a new calibration. It was going through its shake and bake, and all those anomalies were from that radar. Can I say that 100%? No, but it sure as hell is a lot more convincing and realistic than a bunch of aliens.
I'm not claiming aliens, but it wasn't. It came out of the water, and then it also trajected to the cap point. And these are trained aviators. I understand that they're trained aviators, but they're also trained aviators that are prone to optical illusions like everybody else. And
Luna, for instance, we requested all those videos, and she is, gave kind of a deadline when she'd like to have them by, and she calls over there, and they say, well, we don't know anything about the letter kind of stuff. The same old stuff you and I've run into for years on this issue.
So the interdimensional beings is what our witnesses will call these things. I have seen evidence in a skiff that leads me to believe there are things we cannot explain, and I have observed things that are of non-human origin and creation. That's my opinion. But there has been a declassification order from the president, and you will see as soon as that stuff comes out.
Right. So do you think that the American public's going to be super surprised when this comes out, or is it going to be a bit of a nothing burger?
Well, I don't think it'll be a nothing burger. But, we're not going to tell the American people what to make of it. But I think, when, again, you saw my last hearing that I did with the task force where there was some footage that was entered into the archive, and it's pretty shocking for people. I don't know much tech that can deflect a Hellfire missile. I don't know about you.
So if you had to just make a decision now about whether there really were, I guess, aliens moving among us with their strange machines that have all sorts of powers, do you think that's plausible?
I don't call them aliens, and I don't know what these things are that they're using, right? But I think that there's stuff that we have witnessed as members of Congress, been briefed on, that we cannot explain. And I will leave it at that, because that's going to be coming out soon. And I think that the American people will have many of their questions answered. But, there's stuff declassified years ago out of the Pentagon. Multiple videos, Tic Tacs. I think Tucker Carlson family actually had shown one of the videos. It looked like a pyramid that was flying around. And, people see it, they're like, yep, we knew it, and then they move on. So I don't think that, the Earth is going to stop moving. But I think that for a lot of people that are paying attention, it's just confirmation of kind of something that we already suspected.
Well, I think we're going to be releasing as much as we can in the near future. For some reason, and I guess it's just a reason it's been in the minds of people for a long time, that is they want to find out about the UFOs. And anything having to do with UFO or related material, and we're going to be releasing a lot of things that we have, and I think some of it's going to be very interesting to people. I've interviewed people, my first term primarily, but I interviewed some pilots, very solid people, and they said they saw things that you wouldn't believe. So.
And America's just ready. I think they would they'd be alarmed about what it is, and I think mostly they'd be alarmed at why the government won't allow it out. The last briefing I had, that's some pretty incredible photos, and I think that you should have the right to see those. officers in the Navy seeing these very, very large objects on sonar traveling at a very high rate of speed, something that's exponentially faster than anything we can accomplish. You got to realize that you have an object out there in the ocean that hovers, above the ocean in the air, that hovers for, could be hours on end. We have nothing with that capability. You have to you'd run out of fuel. And then when they take off, they just, maybe straight up, and the power to do that is something, the energy it'd take to fuel Los Angeles. I mean, it is that incredible.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Monday. I hope this video, this podcast finds you doing well today. A lot going on in UFO land, as you saw from that kind of extended introduction there, including a video I still can't get over, which was a live UFO making an appearance during one of our live broadcasts. It was pretty incredible as it happened. Still shocked by it. I watch it and I still am completely amazed by that entire encounter. You're watching the Gabriel Speaks podcast, listening, whatever you may be doing. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share if you feel so inclined. Those kinds of things really help out our algorithm, and I do really appreciate it so much. So UFO episode, as I said, we've got a lot going on. We've got Tim Gallaudet, former Rear Admiral, and Sean Kirkpatrick getting kind of nasty with each other, It's some back and forth going on. Ever since this conference, there's been back and forth going on between them on X, and it has been pretty interesting to watch develop. You saw some outtakes, if you were watching previously, of this conference that this skeptic group just released. I think it took place I think it came out April 27th, but I think it took place a little bit before then. At any rate, here we are, 2026, a decade past 2017, almost 2 decades since the actual Nimitz encounter. And these guys are still debating over what it actually was. And Sean Kirkpatrick kind of paints himself into a corner. And we're going to watch this here saying that, well, the explanation is pretty much us getting spied on because our defense sensors suck. To which, of course, Rear Admiral Gallaudet is completely shocked and says, well, shouldn't that information be forwarded instead of all this other stuff? And Kirkpatrick kind of sort of agrees with them, I guess. I don't know. It's a very strange exchange, and there's been some heated debate about whether they actually met when Kirkpatrick was running AARO or when the new director of AARO, Tim, can't remember his name, is running AARO. So pretty interesting. We've got General McCaslin still missing, and if you go to the sheriff's office website, you still can't get an update. I mean, the most recent release was the last release, which was March 12th. The search continues. Their last quote, we're following every credible lead and we'll provide updates when we have verified information, blah, 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 blah. So beyond what we discovered in mid-March, there's been nothing. We know they found hiking boots. We know they found a green shirt he typically wears when he went hiking or he was last seen in at his second home in Pagoda Springs. But beyond that, the sheriff's office has literally nothing other than what was presented the 12th of a very loose timeline with no details. Now, This wouldn't be that crazy, except that this county participates in a program called City Protect, where citizens can sign up on their website with their Ring camera, with other security cameras, and it can plug right in, directly in to this feed that the sheriff's office has access to. But yet we're supposed to believe there's nothing, not a single lead. He just disappeared. There's no video of him even entering or leaving the neighborhood. It is absolutely ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And as I said, the last update, March 12th, the official press release. You know, that the sheriff seems nice, and that's all great. It seems like he cares, but we're not seeing any progress in this case. In fact, we're not seeing a lot of progress on many of these missing scientists' case, and now we might have a new one to add to the list, because Chandra Levy's parents are going around doing interviews saying they think their daughter may have been murdered because of her involvement in the UFO community, because for some reason, after Dr. Stephen Greer's UFO conference in DC was attended in 2020, 2021. Can't remember the exact year. We'll pull it up. But ever since then, they think that she may have been murdered because of her involvement in that community. So, as I said, it's been a pretty wild week in the UFO community. Dan Farah just went on Danny Jones' podcast, and we'll take a look at a segment of that as well. But for starters, let's take a look at just these most recent developments with Chandra Levy's parents.
Week alone,
this is pretty crazy.
11 American scientists.
And again, we're going to start with Sean Ryan's show, and then we're going to go to the Levy's parents here.
Are dead or missing.
Clear. Okay. You don't necessarily.
For me, that is the big takeaway there, right? Throw the word conspiracy theory at it, shut down the conversation. And it's been done for eons, right? Discredit the person asking the questions. Allegory of the cave, right? You try to share with the others the breakthroughs, the crazy things you've discovered. They say, put that shackle back on and get in line. Get back to staring at the shadows with us. All of these scientists missing, including Amy Eskridge and others. It is related. Yes, there could be a group of, let's say, plumbers that for whatever reason, maybe because of some strange aging reason or generational reason, a lot of them die around the same time. It doesn't necessarily mean it's connected. But it does mean it needs to be investigated. Because what if what's killing them is in the pipes? So anybody saying, don't talk about this, anybody trying to shut it down, I would be wary of. I mean, I am wary of a little bit. What's wrong with investigating this? What's the problem with looking into this? Why do you have a problem with looking into this? Are we afraid of what the answer might be? What might be happening here? When some of our best and brightest all go disappearing, and we're not talking like they ran away from home. We're talking at one moment, they're 30 feet behind you. A second later, they have vanished. Vanished. into thin air. But there's no connection. We are supposed to believe there's zero connection. It's ridiculous. And this recently just broke. Chandra Levy's parents saying, oh, shit. Our daughter was tied up in this stuff, hanging out with some people that maybe were concerned about what she had figured out or knew or might share. And maybe that's why she ended up the way that she did. But I'll let them say it for themselves here.
Necessarily believe that Gwandike was involved, that it was that he might have been the wrong person. You believe there's something else that might have happened to Chandra?
Yes, quite possibly. Although, you know, he's still a suspect. I hope he's not still sucking air, but we don't know. But around the same time Chandra was in Washington, Dr. Stephen Greer had his UFO conference in the first couple weeks of May. He presented a lot of witnesses, a lot of whistleblowers on the UFO subject. And at that time, Chandra mentioned something that she knew about the UFOs, that Congressman Condit was on the committee to learn about UFOs.
Well, he's on the Central Higher Intelligence Committee,
yes.
And that she says, oh, he believes in UFOs like I do, and that he deals with this stuff. So then it left me thinking, knowing Chandra, she's very inquisitive. Could she have known something that she wasn't supposed to know? And
yes.
Could she have been wiped out because she knew too much? If you go back into history, you know, Kennedy was killed. Marilyn Monroe, of course, they thought she had a suicide, but maybe she was murdered.
Yes, and Admiral Forrestal, many years before, and William Colby, the head of the FBI, the head of the CIA, they were all murdered. And, of course, Stephen Greer has a list of other people involved in the intelligence on UFOs who were murdered.
Now, this case goes back a while, so I'm going to give you kind of a quick rundown on Chandra Levy. Okay, she was a 24-year-old intern with the Federal Bureau of Prison in Washington, D.C. I mean, where things happen. She straight up disappeared in 2001, and at that time became one of the most high-profile missing person cases in the U.S. She was last seen May 1st, 2001 in D.C. She vanished shortly before returning home to California. And her disappearance sparked a massive national media frenzy. The case drew even more attention due to her reported relationship with Congressman Gary Condit, who was never charged. Now, that's another rabbit hole in itself you could dig into. May 2002 in Rock Creek Park, D.C., her remains were found. The death was ruled a homicide, and a suspect, Ingmar Gwandike, was convicted in 2010. But the conviction was overturned in 2016. I believe someone perjured themselves, their star witness. The charges were dropped, and the case is actually still considered unsolved. Now, the main suspect in that case has recently been deported. He's no longer in the United States. But that case was dismissed. So we're talking about a young federal intern in 2001 attends a Greer conference and maybe plugged in to other things. And she's found murdered. 2001.
Murdered back then. I know there's another list now, but this was in the early 2000s and long before that. So we can't say it was a part of the CIA that did it, but it's always suspicion because it sort of ruined Stephen Greer's conference when all the news came out about Chandra.
And that's crazy too, because we've had a friend of the show, Eric Hecker, on this show who discussed certain individuals at these Greer conferences that were there specifically specifically to find leaks and to possibly do quote unquote wet works. Not the fun kind, I shit you not. And this was roughly 20 years before that. So I doubt that was the first time the intel agents had infiltrated Dr. Greer's conference in Washington, D.C.
Just to be clear, aside from the timing of what you just mentioned in terms of what happened with Chandra and the different and what was happening with the UFO community, is there any other evidence, anything else you can share with us about why you believe there might be this connection?
I don't know. It's something that I thought of 2-3 years ago. I was at Contact the Desert, and I felt a strong, intuitive thing coming from me that there's a possibility there may be a connection. We don't know what really goes on in the government. So many of us don't know the truth about many things. And as you know, the fuel situation and people who are controlling the politics in the world, they're not always given the truth.
Yeah, and I know President Trump wants to reveal it, but he's got to be careful because, you know, what happened to Kennedy and what happened to all these other people.
And I'm stepping on a limb. I'm asking disclosure. Someone knows the truth of what happened to my daughter, our daughter, Chandra, and what has happened to a lot of other people that have disappeared, gone missing.
Man, there are so many people looking to disclosure for answers. And it is heartbreaking because I don't think even if we had quote unquote disclosure, whatever that means, you think all of a sudden, like, these intel agencies are going to come out and go, yeah, we took these people out, or we helped these private companies take people out, or we turned around and let other people take them out. They're not going to do that. When we caught them, and we did have to catch them with MK Ultra, they burned what they could. They burned interrogation tapes during the War on Terror. You think they're going to admit and give us any answers or closure on any of these missing or deceased scientists if they had anything to do with it? And it's unfortunate that they wouldn't. But if they were going to, if there was a decent one amongst them, don't you think they would have done that by now? Crazy. So that's something I'm going to start looking into. The Levy case, I had no idea her parents were thinking it had something to do with being involved in this research. Okay. Back to Kirkpatrick and Gallaudet. Now, Kirkpatrick, as you saw Coltart say at the beginning of this stream, agreed to go to this conference and talk about being a skeptic when it comes to analyzing data. And that's easily understandable because Kirkpatrick is the one that basically gave us the answer. There's nothing weird about any of this stuff other than reflections, refractions, parallax view, and pilots that trust their visuals more than they should. Not kidding. That's what he wants us to believe. He also wants us to believe that the defense system we have set up around this country's perimeter and our oceans was not good enough in 2004, 2005 to pick up some type of underwater submersible vehicle that deployed spy balloons. which is what he believes they really saw. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And I'm not doing it justice, and I promise neither will he. But let's listen to this interaction between Gallaudet and Kirkpatrick. Now, it starts with a pretty heated interaction with Admiral Gallaudet basically calling Sean Kirkpatrick out because of some X posts that Kirkpatrick made about basically Admiral Gallaudet wanting to be on AARO and being denied. Pretty wild stuff. So let's take a listen here.
Sean, I respect you. We both have decades of government service together and in intelligence and whatnot, DOD. I'm going to ask you a point blank and put you on the spot on something. After my 2024 UAP hearing testimony in front of Congress, you had tweeted a response about my statement regarding AARO, where you said, I came and visited AARO and I was bitter because I didn't get a job, and that you believe that was because you didn't hire me because I was prone to conspiracy theories, and that you checked with some of my bosses on that statement. It's well out there. You tweeted it. And ultimately, you know, I didn't go visit AARO when you were there. It was after you left. I was invited by Mike Waschel, the Navy Intel rep, who asked me to come there, and that's what I spoke about during my hearing. And, of course, I didn't look for a job. He invited me, and for me to actually go for a GS-14 job after having been an Undersecretary of Commerce, that was kind of preposterous, I would say. And at the same time, when you said you check with my bosses, I had my bosses formerly were 2 2-stars, 4 4-stars, and a Secretary of Commerce who I've all spoken with, and you never really check with them. So ultimately, your statement there was an outright lie. And I want to ask you what you have to say about that.
I'd say that was not an outright lie, because Mike brought you in, you sat in my office, and we had this conversation about
you weren't there.
taking that.
You had left. It was
I had not
Phillips.
And the position you were looking for was an SES position.
I was not asking for a position. Remember, Mike brought me in. He asked me to come.
Well, then
Tim, let me just ask you this. Time is going to be short. I want to shed any light on the issue itself. Exactly.
Well, good point. No, ultimately, so it's really clear that you have been executing a disinformation campaign about this. This whole slide captures it. And I know you can't acknowledge it because whoever you're on the payroll with won't allow you to. That's my statement. So,
okay, well, that's a great statement that has absolutely no bearing from reality. So
yes, sir.
Okay, radar.
Woo! Man, now I know you've probably heard this, seen this out there. It's interesting because it makes me wonder if like the tracks are coming loose, on this kind of secretive hush insiders group. Like, all these guys have chats with each other in the background. And so when you see stuff like this in the public, not like Kirkpatrick has, shied away from controversy with some of his statements in the past, but it is interesting that he wants you and I to believe a rear admiral would be applying for a lesser position on AARO under Sean Kirkpatrick and then get denied and be so upset about it you make a bunch of noise to your superiors when it actually. And Sean Kirkpatrick also said, and this is really rich, that he contacted Rear Admiral Gallaudet's previous command. And his command said that he was prone to conspiracy theories. But when Rear Admiral Gallaudet contacts those commanders, they say, that dude never called me and talked to me. That should tell you all you need to know about how much we can trust what Mr. Kirkpatrick is saying. Now, he's going to try to explain the Tic Tac here and how the Tic Tac was a balloon shot up from under the ocean by one of our enemies in our domestic waters.
Reflection cubes and calibration spheres. We use those to calibrate our radars. That's what they're for. They're basically balloons with corner cubes in them. And we launch them and we shoot radars at them. We get the returns off them. We use them to calibrate and set those up. It's awesome. So there's a little known declassified CIA program from the late 80s, I think, maybe mid 90s, was essentially taking radar reflection cubes, calibration spheres, sneaking them up underwater off the shore of Adversary and popping them out of the water and sitting back and watching what happens. What are their radars, what do they turn on, what's their response time, right? Really cool. Why wouldn't somebody do that to us?
Sean, may I ask a question here? Nice to connect with you in person for the first time. But about the Nimitz. So I've met all 4 pilots who had visual observations of the contact. And how do you explain that?
I explain it by a couple of different things. One, because I've spoken with them as well, and we've actually determined that the water underneath the main object that was being observed was welling up, not down, which means the object came out of the water, not into it, and I wasn't pushing down. There was no propulsion associated with it. So there's a couple of things here. One, you've got a really cool optical illusion called parallax that pilots are prone to. I am certain that played into this, and since we're talking about 2004, it's a long time ago for people to remember. We've got actual data observations that suggest whatever this thing was came out of the water and not propulsing over it. And then we have the radar. Lots of people like to point to the radar. The radar was actually being tested by DARPA on a new calibration. It was going through its shake and bake, and all those anomalies were from that radar. So can I say that 100%? No, but it sure hell is a lot more convincing and realistic than a bunch of aliens.
I'm not claiming aliens, but it came out of the water, and then it also trajected to the cap point, and these are trained aviators.
I understand that they're trained aviators, but they're also trained aviators that are prone to optical illusions like everybody else. And there's no data that suggests that thing went from point A to point B. It's only a visual report, right?
You could look at things like
Would you state your name?
hydraulic stuff from the water, like
That's what I had them recreate for me. What they saw on the water was an upwelling, not a downwelling. From where the object came out.
What object?
The Tic Tac.
But this would be all kinds of turbulent.
Could have been anything, yeah.
Well, so Sean, respect you immensely. My name Tim Gallaudet, retired Rear Admiral, former NOAA administrator. Having a PhD in oceanography, I don't have any other explanation geophysically for what they observed in terms of that. But yeah, fine, if that's what...
I wasn't suggesting it's geophysical. I'm suggesting that there is probably one of these calibration spheres pops out of the water. And could it have been from somebody else? Absolutely, because as I said, late 80s, we declassified the CIA program. There's absolutely no reason to believe that somebody else wouldn't do that in our test ranges. And we would not know it because our SOSUS network is not all that great.
No. He look. The beauty of that piece actually was its ability to be both things.
So
wow. Okay, this is a great thing to bring up here in public, because if our SOSUS range and our West Coast training range
in the early 2000s
are being infiltrated by adversaries like the Chinese, that is a really important talking point.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly right.
So that's fucking wild, right? So again, Sean Kirkpatrick is saying a adversarial device, I don't know if it would be manned or unmanned vehicle from underwater, right? And you'd think submarine, but then, because it's got to be, if it was where the Tic Tac came from, it would have to be big enough to carry the Tic Tac and also deploy the Tic Tac. So it couldn't be like some little unmanned tiny sub, right? It'd have to be like a legit, like sub. And we don't even know who these adversaries are, if they would have maybe they do have their subs rigged to deploy such a system. But the sub surfaced, sort of, and released the Tic Tac, is what Mr. Kirkpatrick is saying. And that Tic Tac is released. It's going all around. It's basically like a balloon. So that's why the reports of the movement seem weird. But again, it's not accounting for the radar. And you have a Rear Admiral Gallaudet that had a doctorates in oceanography saying, there's nothing that can do that from the ocean's level. There's nothing that can come up and deploy something that big and then, swell up the water and then go back down. And Kirkpatrick just kind of shakes it off and says, well, it's more believable than aliens. To which, Gallaudet says, I'm not saying aliens. I'm just saying that explanation is crazy. Not to mention you're saying that our adversaries were able to get a submarine operating in our waters, around our aircraft carriers, our submarines, our battleships, and deploy this thing and not be detected at all. I mean, this is like the hunt for the Red October sub that nobody could see or detect underwater, just silent and invisible underwater, apparently.
Exactly.
Why is Congress not investigating that?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. Why don't you ask them that?
I like.
And that's a great point. If the hunt for Red October silent sub can get that close to our ships operating without being detected, wouldn't that be something important to focus on? To wit, Kirkpatrick makes a joke about it, says, yeah, they should focus on that, kind of insinuating, implying that they're wasting their time looking into the UFO, UAP, interdimensional, extraterrestrial explanation, whatever it may be, and not enough time looking into the terrestrial explanations, as in our enemies, our adversaries, could very well have technologies that might be beyond what we have, and we are unable to detect. Which is a valid point, because we do need our military and we do need our defenses, especially in this day and age. But I don't think that means you don't look into the other stuff.
Yeah, yes, exactly right.
Why aren't they doing, that as opposed to other things? So look, going through all these things is difficult, especially the farther back in time you go, which brings me to that next major data point. Look, there's an inverse correlation between how far back in the past an event occurred and the amount of data available to actually analyze it. Right. So the farther back in time you go, the less data there is to analyze, which means everybody can speculate all they want. You're never going to actually know. And that is a problem. Right. And I told Congress this, so like, you can keep asking me about the Nimitz all you want, but until somebody has actual raw data to analyze, visual reporting is not evidence. It is a starting point for an investigation that requires data and more evidence. Right? I've looked at. So what Ryan described to us was a sphere with a cube in it. So a sphere with a cube in it is a calibration sphere.
So Ryan Graves, when he saw a sphere with a cube inside of it, what he saw was one of our radar calibration spheres. And being a expert pilot, didn't realize that and thought it was a UFO. That's what Kirkpatrick would have us believe.
That's what he described.
But that's something the general public wouldn't know.
That's exactly right. And yet he should know that as an aviator. Right, so we've got that part. All right, you go back in time, it's harder to do. Operators, they really need a feedback loop to learn. And finally, this last one, and I think we've just touched on this, right? Operators don't have the best analytic hygiene. And they certainly tend to believe that their view as experienced aviators or other operators are never wrong.
It's just so crazy. 20 years later, and it's the same debate. And I have heard the argument about the underwater balloons. One of the first videos I did with Ryan's pointing at failure, he talked about that theory. He knew all about it, had seen the paperwork on it, the descriptions of it. He even made a video on it. And it makes sense. At the same time, though, to think that something like that could be operating near us and within our waters without us being able to detect it is a little frightening. And we're supposed to, I guess, just discard all the maneuvers we were told that these things make and discard all of the witness accounts from the pilots because, well, they're just seeing things. I mean, this is like the same shit they did in the 40s. Right? There's an explanation for everything. Discredit and laugh at the person if they're not buying that shit. Because they're just stupid. I think when you have a retired rear admiral, telling you there's not an explanation for this thing that happened in the ocean, should probably listen to that guy. I mean, I would. So here's kind of Ross Coulthart's reaction to that whole interaction. And there's been more drama going on between these two on X, arguing back and forth about the meeting date, when the meeting took place. Turns out that Gallaudet did go to AARO, but he went to AARO well after Sean Kirkpatrick was gone.
former AARO director, Sean Kirkpatrick, he held a press conference of sorts, a presentation on April 9th, and audio was just released. Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, friend of the show, kind of confronting him about some alleged lies. I know you'd like to give your take on this.
It's quite something. I have to admit, I think Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick self-immolated himself. He made, I think, an arrogant and false assertion back to Admiral Tim Gallaudet retired, and I think it blew up in his face. So, as I understand it, it was some kind of Washington, D.C. area skeptics association meeting, and Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick had agreed to speak to the skeptics. No surprises there. He does his level best as a former and serving counterintelligence operative to basically pour on everything associated with the whole UAP subject, and he didn't let back. What he didn't realise, I think, was that Admiral Tim Gallaudet, who's an extremely honourable and decent man, was going to ask a question from the audience. So when, shortly before the end of the whole hearing, there was an opportunity to ask questions, Sean Kirkpatrick indicated he'd give about 5 minutes of Q&A, and thankfully Tim was the first to ask the question, and he basically raised with Kirkpatrick that Kirkpatrick had publicly claimed in an earlier response to Tim's congressional testimony that Gallaudet came to the Pentagon's UAP investigation office, AARO, looking for a job, i.e. a GS-14 executive service job or similar position. And he says Sean Kirkpatrick implied that Tim was bitter when he wasn't hired and that he had, quote, predisposed tendencies for conspiracies without evidence and was unsuitable. And he claimed that he had verified this with Gallaudet's bosses and peers. Now, frankly, that was a grubby, disreputable smear by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, and I know it to be false. Why do we know it to be false? Why can we be quite clear about this? Well, firstly, I've spoken to multiple people when I did my checks about Tim very early on. I don't think I've ever spoken to people in the military and the intelligence community who speak so highly about an individual. The words used with Tim are exemplary, honourable, decent, truthful, honest. I wish I could say the same for Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. Unfortunately, one of the reasons why we can be so sure that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's recollection is, how does one say this, inaccurate, is because Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was claiming that he was present when Tim came to AARO, and apparently in a role, because he described Tim Gallaudet meeting him in his office. And we know for a fact, because I've reported this, by the time this meeting occurred, we know, because I broke the story, Sean Kirkpatrick had bolted to the Oak Ridge National Laboratories, something that the Defense Department also tried to conceal by deleting him from the staff list after we discovered his name was early on the staff list at ORNL before he'd even left AARO. But Kirkpatrick's last day as AARO director, I have confirmed, was the 1st of December 2023. Gallaudet's meeting was on May the 31st, 2024, 5 months later, with Tim Phillips, who was then the acting AARO director after Kirkpatrick had left. So I'm sorry, what Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick is claiming about Admiral Tim Gallaudet is either a misapprehension on his part. I think there was once a British Foreign Secretary or Cabinet Secretary who called it a terminological inexactitude, which some people might call a lie or a fabrication. It's just not true. Gallaudet has stated that he was invited via Navy and Intel contacts. He never applied or sought employment. Frankly, it's inconsistent with his background as a retired rear admiral, for God's sake.
Oh, man. Ross Coulthart with the sick burn. I can just see Ross dropping the mic. Yeah, no, that's rough when Ross Coulthart burns you like that. You better rethinking your decisions. There's a lot going on about these requested files that Luna made. Luna requested these files as part of her duties of the UAP task force, and I forget what the other one's called, something on disclosure or something. But anyway, these UFO files that Trump now says he's going to he's going to release. The thing is, though, is that the Pentagon was already working on declassifying most of these files, and we don't know how crazy world changing this stuff is really going to be, or if it's just going to be kind of, hey, yep, another weird thing in the sky, big deal, or if there's going to be some really shocking stuff that we'll see in there. Now, one thing we can say for certain is over the last several weeks, Representative Burchett has clearly been very concerned about some of the things that were shared with him. Not just the files and the paperwork and the images and the
And I've
video,
had so many of these,
but also in his conversations with some of these folks in leadership. And here he is now getting into some of the stuff he thinks Americans ought to know, including energy, which seems to be a topic that draws all kinds of the wrong attention.
briefings now. I even had one since the one that you're describing. I had that was a member of our leadership arranged, which tells you the serious nature of this thing.
Yeah.
And, I just think people need to know what we've seen and what these pilots are seeing. And Luna, for instance, we requested all those videos, and she is, gave kind of a deadline when she'd like to have them by. And she calls over there, and they say, well, we don't know anything about the letter kind of stuff. The same old stuff you and I have run into for years on this issue. And America's just ready. I think they would they'd be alarmed about what it is. And I think mostly they'd be alarmed at why the government won't allow it out.
Yeah.
And what's at the base of it, and all the theories aside, whether you think it's extraterrestrial, if it's something from this earth, if it's the Russians or the Chinese or the Americans, which I don't think it is, and then maybe allow some of the pilots to talk. The last briefing I had, some pretty incredible photos, and I think that you should have the right to see those.
Yeah.
And the critics are going to blast it. They're going to say it's AI, it's whatever. But you got to go back and ask yourself, why would some of the best pilots in the world, why would they risk their credibility to come out with this? Because anytime they make a sighting, a lot of times they'd have to get a psych evaluation and get all this stuff. And even if it's something they saw on radar. But now we've got officers in the Navy seeing these very, very large objects on sonar traveling at a very high rate of speed, something that's exponentially faster than anything we can accomplish. You got to realize that you have an object out there in the ocean that hovers, above the ocean in the air, that hovers could be hours on end. We have nothing with that capability. You have to you'd run out of fuel, and then when they take off, they just, maybe straight up, and the power to do that is something, the energy it'd take to fuel Los Angeles. I mean, it is that incredible.
Wow. Energy, right? One thing, these missing scientists, scholars, former Air Force generals, one thing they did all have in common is energy. Yeah, we know that there are folks in charge of the oil and gas industry that would do all that they can to prevent some type of new free energy from being discovered. They have all the cards and have had all the cards for the last century and a half. There's so much oil. They put a system in place to monitor how much actually gets out into the market. That's how much they care about the money they're making off of oil and gas. Could we be seeing essentially private industry, most likely affiliated with major energy, oil and gas companies, interfering with advancements in energy? It's quite possible that that is the connection between all of these missing scientists. And there's more than this. There's at least 2 more, possibly 4 more to this list of 10. Could the desire to keep that chokehold on the money that flows for energy drive folks to things like this? Were these folks making breakthroughs that we don't know about? Or is it even just that they were capable and could at one point make breakthroughs that would impact their bottom line? Some food for thought, something to think about. Because as it stands now, we still haven't heard anything from the FBI on this. Not peep. And as far as disclosure goes, yeah. I believe it already happened. I think that there is NHI out there. But I think there's a lot left to interpretation. And there's a lot of fear that can hold us back from making these kinds of leaps. Okay, so here's Dan Ferret. This interview just came out, about an hour ago. This is on Danny Jones. We're just going to watch a little segment of it here. I have not seen this. But this topic he's talking about here is multiple species of aliens or interdimensional beings, what have you. So let's listen to what Dan has to say on his thoughts on the multiple species theory. crazy. And so it can be so frustrating, right? Because love him or hate him, whatever you want to think of Dan Farah, whatever your opinion is. I don't really have one on Dan Farah. He's never done me wrong. But as he said, he's trying to live in this area for his film where it was like just what's on record and what is unclassified and what can be talked about, because that alone is crazy enough, without getting to the vetted stuff, I guess. So you have a guy like Dan Farah has been, he researched it day and night to make that film. And he's asked that question after all this time, what do you think it is? And like him or not, I think you want to put some stock into that answer, because, with that answer is hours and hours of research in interviews about this topic. So when he does say, I think we're looking at multiple types of intelligence, I think there's something to that. 100%. 100%. And with some of the conversations I've had with people, I could say I almost know that to be true. So yes, what a week. And we still don't know where General McCaslin is. As I said, the latest update, you can go to the sheriff's website, and the latest update is the last update from the middle of March. It's May. We don't have anything new. Nothing. Other than that was a community that had a special program where people could plug their doorbell cams into a monitored system by the sheriff's department, and they still didn't catch any video of him. Nothing. That is almost harder to believe than him just disappearing into thin air. Wow. What a week and a half, y'all. And as far as Mr. Kirkpatrick and Rear Admiral Gallaudet goes, whatever. I think Kirkpatrick's explanation for what the Tic Tac was may be the worst explanation I've heard for what the Tic Tac might have been. It's an explanation, but that's about it. It is an explanation. Oh, man. All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning into this episode, UFO News Update. And we will see you next time on the Gabriel Speaks Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you enjoyed it. And I'll see you next time.